So I first want to thank everyone for coming. This is an amazing, cathartic event for all of us, I think. Especially people who have been on the front lines. This has been something like a full circle for us to come here. So I basically say whenever we get together to unveil a memorial site like this, we want to talk about this virus and what it's really done to all of our lives. So it sort of came into our lives 1 year ago with its first tangible effects, like an invisible yet somehow also blinding storm. It brought with it destructions and so much loss. We gather here in this moment to reflect and share our experiences. And we want to also thank Kristina Libby. She is an amazing artist and activist from New York City who started this project back in April and has brought it nationwide. I also want to thank Lovells. They donated these flower petals for us to embellish our display here, and 1-800-Flowers for donating the heart garland. Robert Mitchell Caruso Funeral Home also donated these eternity candles, and they are to use on our display and also she's delivering them to families of survivors here in town. So the Floral Heart Project has one simple goal, and that's to create a safe space to mourn in our community and allow us to remember what this pandemic has done to all of our lives. Today, over 100 garlands are being unveiled from Maine to Florida to Washington to California, Ohio to Texas, and almost every state in between. This grassroots initiative found its way to Medfield, and I recruited my son's amazing 9th grade community service group who has done so much for various communities through charitable events and organizations. They've also sponsored and supported countless outreach ventures. This generation has lost so much in their irreplaceable high school careers, I suppose, experiences. And their inclusion in this project has promoted conversations and discussions amongst this age group. A huge thank you to Mr. Sperling and Mr. Praga for embracing this idea and bringing it to the high school. On a personal note, working on the front lines has been so stressful, and we've all had different ways of coping. But for me, I put my feelings on paper, and I found that writing and maybe having a glass of wine or two has helped me get through this. So I'm just going to invite Chase to come up and read a few of my reflections. Come on up.
I would like to share with you a little piece my mom wrote called What I Have Seen. What I have seen. I have seen fear and bravery. I have seen agony and healing. I have seen suffering and peaceful passing. I have seen the loss of dignity and the deepest displays of humanity. I have seen decisiveness and unification. I have seen loneliness and beautiful companionships. I have seen anxiety and unending dedication. I have seen broken and I have seen rebuilding. I have seen heroes, so many heroes, but perhaps what I have seen in the most is resilience.
Shay, come on over.
My mom also says resilience has looked so different for all of us, but each and every one of us should recognize how far we have traveled on this unwelcome and unimaginable journey and what we have collectively overcome. Today we mark the first National Day of Mourning for the 500,000 Americans who have lost their lives to COVID-19 and those who continue to suffer its impacts. We recognize that grief has a funny way of burying itself deep within us, Healing can sometimes begin by unpacking it, putting a name to it, and holding its hand.
Thanks, guys. That's amazing. I have 3 other mothers who have worked in the front lines, and their boys are going to speak a few words and also perhaps introduce their moms. So I'd like to start with Matt George and Kristin. Do you want to come over? Kristin, would you like to come stand? Come.
Hello, my name is Matt George. My mom is a pediatrician. She chose pediatrics because she loves taking care of newborns and watching them grow to become teenagers. Most importantly, she chose to become a pediatrician because kids are incredibly resilient. They are the best kind of patients and have never stopped amazing her. Today, as we approach a full year of navigating the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to acknowledge and remember the children and their families who have been impacted by COVID in less tangible ways. Pediatricians have learned early on that children represent a small percent of all cases of COVID and that most pediatric cases are not severe. However, they soon learned that physical symptoms of COVID were not going to be our main concern. It is the mental health problems among their patients that has been overwhelming. They are seeing anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and substance abuse on a regular basis. Children are grieving different kinds of losses: the loss of social structure and seeing their friends, the loss of normal school day, school trips and sports, the loss of touring college campuses, proms, and graduations, the loss of life events that are rites of passages in growing up. There is a higher level of stress that is universal for families. Parents are dealing with job loss, challenges of distance learning, loss of family members, missing life events, and social isolation. They are quite simply exhausted. Today, let us remember the families that are working so hard to survive the emotional impact of COVID-19. My mom is confident that when we come out at the end of this, that children will adapt and recover in a way that will amaze us.
I'm now going to introduce Owen Duross and his mom Danielle.
Hello, my name is Owen. My mother is a nurse in a special care nursery. We've talked about how different and difficult it has been for many families having new babies born during this pandemic. Today, I would also like to acknowledge and remember the new parents, infants, and families who experienced a birth or pregnancy infant loss this past year and all that they have lost in their experiences. Expectant parents have had to deal with so much uncertainty and isolation during a typical celebratory time. Let us remember the parents that became very ill from the virus during their pregnancies, the parents that worried about the unknown effects of this illness on their fetuses, the infants and parents that were separated after birth because of a COVID positive result, and the families that were not allowed to visit these new babies, including parents, grandparents, and siblings. Let us remember those who had a pregnancy or an infant loss and the isolation they must have experienced when family members were not allowed to visit the hospital or to help support and console them. Thankfully, there was still such happiness surrounding the birth of 2020. But it is important to remember those who have suffered during all of this.
Cheryl Adolph and Nathan, if you want to introduce your mom, Nate.
I'm going to read from this. I would like to For those that you don't know me, my name is Cheryl. I'm a wife, a mother of 3 boys, and a nurse for over 20 years. I'm a frontline worker at Mount Auburn Hospital in Cambridge. My husband also works in the medical field as a physician assistant in Boston. The floor I work on was one of the first units in the hospital that became COVID. My life as a nurse was about to change. Our families were extremely nervous and stressed as we were about to enter the unknown. We told them and constantly reassured them that we would never put them at risk and we would be safe. There wasn't a time at the house before my shift that my kids or my husband wouldn't say, "I love you, and please, most importantly, be safe while you're there." COVID has been an isolating disease. Nurses are often the people to come into contact with the patients for long periods of time. We have become creative in the ways we do things. So there is limited time of exposure with less time in the rooms. Not being able to spend as much time with our patients can be very difficult for me and my coworkers. Just going into a patient's room would require double masking, putting a gown on, a face shield, 2 pairs of gloves. We would cluster all care to our patients. This would require a lot of planning and teamwork. I feel blessed that I work with a great group of nurses that all had the same goals and priorities to give the best care we knew how to give our patients. Our patients were often scared. Frequently, patients were isolated until it was proven if they had COVID or not. Some were scared they would be exposed just from being there, even if they weren't sure if they had COVID. They were scared of being alone. They were scared of the unknown, but most of all, they were scared and afraid of dying. Patients were not allowed to have visitors, so we did our best to arrange Zoom calls, phone calls, and most of all, spend a little extra time with them so that they would never feel alone. Patients' families, where I work, are very creative. We have a TV station outside of Mount Auburn Hospital. We have a TV station in the room that plays music and shows a view of the river so they can watch the boats and go by. I still remember several families going out there and holding up signs that would say, "We love you and thank you for all your hard work." To Michelle, Lisa, and Jill, and to anyone else that has lost a loved one to this disease, I want you to know they did not die alone. We nurses were there. We were with them through it all. Whether we were just saying a prayer, playing music for them, or holding their hand, we were there by their side. They were not alone. The overwhelming support and gratitude from the community, patients, families, our own families, co-workers, was amazing. All the words of encouragement, special notes and gifts, meals, they were never ending, and that's what kept us going day to day. We are not heroes. We are nurses doing what we love to do, which is caring for our patients. I'm happy to see the number of new cases, hospitalizations, and a number of people dying decrease every day from COVID. We are starting to see a light at the end of a very long tunnel. Our hearts are heavy, but filled with hope. We are shaken, but not broken. Nurses have grown and have become stronger, and we know we can get through this. I am proud to say that I am a nurse and was an essential part of the effort to battle the COVID pandemic. Bless you all. You're very welcome.
So thank you everybody for sharing your stories. Now I'd like to take a moment of silence as we recognize what we have all been through and all of the loss we've all suffered. You are welcome to join us from home if you're watching by lighting a candle as we turn on our tea lights. We are not done with this battle, but we now have the proper armor to fight it. If we remain vigilant, we can defeat this virus that has altered all of our lives so unprecedentedly. For those of you watching from home, please feel free to visit the communal site we will have set up here for the next week Lastly, before we depart, I'd like to introduce 3 lovely women. Jill Fetterman, I apologize. Lisa Post and Michelle Pepe, I love that, who grew up in Massachusetts together and lost their beloved dads within 9 days of each other. They reached out to me to describe their visceral grief and their desire to memorialize them on this day of mourning. I'd now like to invite them to say a few words, only if you're comfortable.
Hi everyone. So this is amazing, first of all, and we represent obviously 500,000 plus, but to be able to do this now when we weren't able to have any type of funeral and memorialization, any type of memorial, this is really something. This is really everything, and the outpouring of support and Melissa for putting this together and the Floral project. There's no words. And my dad is looking down and he's just in awe.
So Lisa, Jill, and I all grew up in Randolph together, and we had mutual friends, but we weren't necessarily close friends. And unfortunately, within 9 days, our 3 dads died back in April, where it was still fresh and new, and we didn't know to wear masks, and we brought it in, and we didn't know anything back then. And sadly, we've been brought together, and we're now sisters along with 500,000 other families, because a COVID loss is
like no other.
It's trauma after trauma after trauma, and we're still living it. And these masks are a reminder, and just everything's a reminder. And we just thank the frontline workers, all you nurses, all you supportive people, everybody that recognizes what a beast this COVID is. And thank you all. Jill?
Lisa and Michelle said it all. I just want to thank everybody for this wonderful memorial for our dads and
all the other families.
And so that they didn't die in vain.
This is our public mourning.
Right, this is our public mourning, and we never got to mourn. We never got to have funerals. We never got to see them when they were in the hospitals. And we never got to hold their hands. And thank you so much.
Yes,
to the
and
nurses.
I believe you, and I know that the nurses were with my dad, and I was able to speak to one, and angels. I mean, for what we couldn't do, thank you so much. So much. It means so much that you guys are there with them, and I believe it. I don't feel like he was alone. I don't.
So thank you, everyone.
And
thank you.
thank you.
All right.
No.
Oh, right here. I couldn't even see. I do have something to give to you guys. Oh.